The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by Tuity Fitness and the Vegas Beer Guys.
Everything Sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Friday the 13th edition. Today, we talk Friday the 13th Part 2. A rookie Steve Miner classic. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man in the mask himself, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. What do you got for us, Tom?
I told the others they didn't believe me. You're all doomed. You're all doomed.
Ralph.
I don't know whether he's talking about the counselors in training or the legacy cast of the original movie.
Yeah, or himself.
Physician, heal thyself. That I never thought about that. What's a great twist that he makes that statement and he's the first to get killed.
He's the first to get killed. It's amazing. And how smart. I mean, it's really cool that they bring him back. You get a little continuity.
Well, I think
You're in the same town.
There's a lot to be said for the strength of a fake out when you do it successively.
Uh-huh.
Because they've done this fake out already with the legacy cast member of the last movie. The final girl of the last movie,
Right.
meets the same end that Crazy Ralph does. So I guess Steve Miner and the screenwriters are counting on the fact that you would never expect them to do it twice. It's a double bluff.
That's great.
You know, even Hitchcock didn't contemplate killing both Vera Miles and
Right.
Janet Leigh.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that makes Crazy Ralph the Arbogast of this movie.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking Friday the 13th Part 2. Directed by Steve Miner. It's a 1981 film. What do you say to this, Tom? 29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, you know,
Tragic.
I think that's the nail in the coffin for Rotten Tomatoes for me.
Well, it's not Rotten Tomatoes. That's the nail in the coffin for reviewers.
I think again I'm buying into all of Paul Schrader's rhetoric about gaming the system. I don't trust any algorithm that results in 29% for this movie. Yeah, criminally low.
Yeah.
But again, like, so criminally low, it makes me wonder whether their statistics are correct. Because it feels
all they're doing is adding up the number of views and counting how many are bad.
That's what they want you to think. Yeah, that's criminally low, and again, I guess it speaks to the low. We talked about this in the previous episode. The low reputation of sequels and horror movies, and when you combine the two, it's a double whammy of disillusionment.
Well, and on the Project 1982, I brought up Steve Miner as the direct, because he directs this and Friday the 13th Part 3, the next film as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition, he's done. We did this on the How Dare You podcast, the movie House with William Catt, which is a movie I adore and love. But he's got a pretty varied career. I mean, what can I say? He did do Soul Man.
We've covered him on this podcast, of course.
Before.
Yeah. He's what do you call it? Which Halloween movie did he do? Is it Resurrection?
I thought it was H2O.
Wasn't that Rick Rosenthal who did?
Oh, that's Rosenthal. You're right. No, wait. No, he did do H2O.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Like that guy in the mental institution in the Simpsons.
I'm going crazy.
With Ned Flanders' doctor.
Yeah, right.
That's what I said.
Yeah, but he's got Warlock. He stayed within this genre, but then he did Forever Young, My Father the Hero. I brought up with Matt, I just fucking love Lake Placid, and that's his movie. And then we don't have to talk about Soul Man. It's a misstep in every possible way.
Don't mention it every single time you mention Steve Miner.
I know.
If you don't want to talk about it,
don't.
Yeah. Forever Young is a big surprise there, but I guess he's into his skewed timelines.
Right. Yeah.
Unintentionally here, but
yeah.
Later purposefully.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a guy with a yeoman's-like career. He's a worker.
He's down there in the mines.
Right.
Like a real miner. No, I mean, I'm struck. I can't believe this is his directorial debut. The confidence he shows with the camera is astonishing. I don't think he's ever made a better film directorially that I've seen.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I've not seen Soul Man.
I don't remember it matching up.
2023 is probably not the best time to revisit that movie, is it?
Probably not. But this film, on a budget of just $1.2 million, opening weekend of 6.4, in the USA 21.7, and in the world 21.7 as well.
Yeah, it's sometimes it makes financial sense to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, right.
If they had waited another year, maybe we wouldn't have got those returns.
Yeah. There was an appetite, obviously.
Yeah.
I think
a slew of imitators as well.
Yeah, right.
Like, I guess what they introduced to the world of horror was the idea of slashers based on named holidays. I don't know, like named named holidays, like kind of notable calendar events.
April Fool's Day.
I was just like in my head, I'm like, Friday the 13th isn't a holiday. What is it?
Right. Yeah.
Something that they put in the calendar.
Yeah.
What is it? It's very interesting, that decision to go straight in the year after.
Right. I mean, immediately, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But narratively, it's 5 years later.
Well, that's
this series goes from like 1979 to 2455 or something like that by the time we get to Jason X.
It's just, I don't understand why horror franchises have such a hard time keeping the real world time and in world time consistent.
By the time
they can't seem to do it.
By the time you get to number 5, it should be like the year 2000 at least.
And as I said, they catch up with themselves midway through these films, and then they fuck it all up again. It's I don't understand why this is so hard. There's a 5-year time jump is narratively meaningless as well.
Yeah, right.
Except, and again, that's just a sort of adherence to so it's in alignment with the title, right? Because they know 5 years later there'll be a Friday the 13th. I'm assuming that's why they picked 5 years.
Maybe. I bet there was a Friday the 13th sooner than 5 years later.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, what other reason would setting it 5 years later be?
I thought it was more the narrative reason of like the town resetting.
Okay. I'll buy that.
Oh, you're going back to the camp? They're reopening that kind of thing?
But they're not. Everyone keeps saying that about this movie, and that's not what happens.
That's true. You're right.
Nobody's reopening any camp. This is simply a counselor's training camp. This is just real estate that is derelict, and they want to use it. So they're like, okay, well, let's use it to train up a new generation of counselors. Makes total sense to me.
Fine.
but they're not going. That is one of the things I really like about most of these sequels is that they don't actually go back to Camp Crystal Lake until part 6. Because
not technically, but it's like they're always near. I like that in this movie. They say
it's a counselor's training camp.
Right, they say the same lake, different camp.
Well, it's not a camp. They're just training the counselors. No children are coming to this camp.
But it's at a camp.
But nobody's. But it's not Crystal Lake. It's just.
I understand.
It's basically like it's their rehearsal in terms we could understand. It's their rehearsal. It's their rehearsal space.
It's their rehearsal space for becoming a counselor. I get it.
And then the next 2 movies, it's Cabins in the Wood.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, well, what's left but a rural mental institution? And then part 6 is like, well, there's nothing left now, so we'll go back to the camp.
And that's fine.
And bring actual children there.
Yeah. I can't remember. I wrote down, I think this is a Roger Ebert. We talked about both Siskel and Ebert, really, in our ranking episode, yes. and their anger towards these movies in particular. But I found this kind of funny note. So I think it's him, but it might not be. It says, this review will suffice for the Friday the 13th movie of your choice. And you could just supplant any of the Friday the 13ths for this shitty review. And that to me kind of speaks to the lack of a willingness to watch this movie on its own terms.
Completely, yeah. It's both their major blind spots for reasons that I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of respect for both of them, particularly Roger Ebert, but we all have them. We all have our phenomena that we can't understand,
mm-hmm.
that we can't engage in. But it became a virulent prejudice against anything under the banner of horror.
Yeah, right.
Or slasher fiction. So I think his syndicated opinions, along with many others, did a lot to sort of amplify that disdain for horror movies that set back film criticism, I would say, because this movie is vastly underappreciated for what it's actually doing.
I agree.
Both in the world of horror and in the world of film series.
Well, let's talk what I'm going to be calling for all of these movies, the OSPL.
Good for you.
Have you deciphered it yet?
Nope.
Old school Paramount logo, baby.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, no. Well, this is interesting.
Makes me so happy.
It's a bit neutro for my tastes.
Come on.
Because no, I know that it's retroactively classic, because
the
1980s Paramount logo still have the Gulf and Western Company under it.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's a little bit. It's still got that air of conglomeration around it. It's not for nothing that Mel Brooks in Silent Movie called them Engulf and Devour.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, retroactively classic, because every time I see the Paramount logo now, I'm like, oh, I'm watching a Top Gun movie.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Something else that really struck me, and this isn't borne out by the rest of the movies, a Steve Miner film.
Yeah.
How rare is it for a sequel to identify the director up front, especially...
That's interesting.
A director who's making his debut.
Mm-hmm.
There is no cachet associated with this name.
Right.
This is literally meaningless. We don't know what a Steve Miner film is because we've never seen one before.
Because we've never seen one, right?
Not one has not been made. So I just love that. I love that this movie's auteuring it up and going like,
a Steve Miner joint.
It's a Steve. Yeah, exactly. It's like there's at least some recognition of he's kind of the selling point of this film, and I completely agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if they
They don't do it for the other movies. They really don't. But there's no compelling reason why they should do it for Steve Miner.
Right.
So whoever's choice it was it whether
Kudos.
it was accidental or intentional was the right one.
Well, and we start off with our final girl.
Well, we got a little bit of Itsy Bitsy Spider. Again, that overlap between children's nursery rhymes and adult horror.
Sure.
I don't know how common that was at the time, though. That might have been an innovative choice.
Right.
It's very tropey now, but I'm not sure it was in 1981. And we get the return of the original theme.
Yeah.
The Harry Manfredi music. But in a sequence of shots that's far more Halloween than Friday the 13th, I would say. Those shots of the kind of the feet approaching the house,
Right.
look straight like they could have come straight out of Halloween 2.
Walking in puddles and whatnot.
And that came out in 81 as well, didn't it? Halloween 2.
Yeah.
But again, the idea of sort of reaching out to other franchises to sort of fill the vacuum, because we don't really know. We've got nothing. We're starting from scratch in terms of iconography and mythology. None of this has been established yet.
You know what's funny is I don't know what made me think of this too, because there's different circumstances. In this movie, she's already in the house, but the beginning of this movie seems like it had maybe a little bit of influence on Scream 3.
Sure.
I see that.
I definitely
in the
see
Liev
that,
Schreiber walking around the apartment kind of a thing.
It's kind of
what it reminded me of, and so that's why I was speaking to that in our ranking episode, in which I see other horror movies borrowing from these movies, and I think that says something about these movies.
It's part of the horror palette, I think, for postmodern horror movies.
Right.
It's definitely in the lexicon that is being drawn from. But at the time, I think it was more like, what are we going to do? What did Halloween do?
Right.
Which is it's by no means the wrong way to go about it. Here's an interesting choice up front, given that this is a relatively early sequel. The impasse of recap footage.
Right.
But done as a dream.
But done as a bad dream.
Well, and that's it, and that's where the
nightmare.
The horror of it all makes it less clunky, because it's legitimate trauma, right? This is exactly what she would be dreaming about this, because it's a traumatic event. Of course she would have like flashbacks and nightmares about this. But at the same time, simultaneously, the movie is doing what all kind of recap footage of this period does, which is to sort of re-edit the first movie as if it was always leading to this point.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, his name was Jason. I'm like, no, Jason was a footnote in Friday the 13th. You know what I mean? He wasn't the focal point.
He was literally a dream, not unlike we're having right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, the shots of Jason drowning in this dream work on 2 levels of point of view flashback. Right? Because it's
right. Like, I forgot that there is they show him drowning as well.
So it kind of follows up the original as if it was always an origin story. But it's also the legacy of early sequels, beginning with a big chunk of the last film. Like we saw this from I think the earliest film we've covered is the Planet of the Apes series, and that we've seen that through to at least Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
The Rocky series of like you begin your sequel with about 10 minutes or so of the last movie.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing here, but we're finding a reason for it to happen, which is the
there's a narrative reason, right? Yeah.
Which is again why The Final Girl is such a great conduit from the original into the sequel, even though it's a fake out here.
Right.
But they put a twist on it, and they cut it up so it's not just one continuous chunk, which again later movies don't do in this series. Mm-hmm. But they kind of cut it up so it's bite-sized, digestible bits.
Well, and you mean in the sense that we're toggling back to her in her bed?
Yeah,
tossing and turning?
And in that kind of montage process, they give you all like what they want you to know, to make it look like Friday the 13th was always naturally evolving towards this point, when we know the opposite is true, that the story was done.
Yeah.
Jason was there as a jump scare only.
Right.
That's how he's listed in the credits. Jump scare only, Jason. But this movie makes it look like, that was his origin story, and now he's grown into the villain of the piece. But that's simply not true.
Well, because he still looks, when he jumps out of the lake at the end of that first movie,
Yeah.
he looks like he's the age he was when he drowned.
Right.
Actually, now that I think about it, I've never been too clear. How much time is supposed to have been passed since he drowned?
It's got nothing to do with you not being so clear.
I know.
There is no clarity.
You're right.
It's kind of interesting. You put the ending of the last film in a dream sequence, which sort of retcons the original as an ambiguous mix of dream and memory.
Mm-hmm.
And that depends on how you read the ending of the last movie. I don't know whether it works better for this movie if that was a dream or a memory.
Yeah, right.
I feel like there's pros and cons for both, and neither are particularly satisfactory. But it's quite interesting that, you know, the one of the readings of the end of Friday the 13th is that it's a dream, and then this movie immediately picks up that ambiguity in the way it shows that footage.
Yeah.
And will then go on to do its own version of that with its own ending.
With its own ending, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all very interesting stuff.
I agree.
And you know, I certainly feel sorry for the actress. You know, the circumstances in which she came back, not knowing she was going to be killed off, not having a script.
She showed up at the end of filming.
Yeah.
To find out, you've shot most of this movie.
Yeah, and it's in a sense, it's a shame it's a fake out, because you can see a genuinely interesting continuation of the story with her as the final girl facing Jason in this movie. But all of that kind of takes care of itself, because what we also gain by killing her off at this point is also a good choice.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that if we didn't end up with Amy Steele as Ginny, maybe I'd be more pissed, but that is what we get.
Right, yeah.
And she's so good that I think she almost supplants, I forget the other actor's name.
Well, there you go. You answered your own question.
Yeah.
No, that's it, isn't it? It's like for like, and you've got this one scene with the character from the last movie as well.
Right.
But it's not kind of a redundant fake out, because this whole scene is about fake out.
Yeah, I mean, you've got kind of a play on Psycho. I love the curtain pole.
Yeah.
And
what you were saying.
No, go ahead. All I was going to say, I love that curtain pole and the idea that we're playing with Psycho, but we go against expectations, and it's an inversion. And
yeah, absolutely. It's riffing on both Hitchcock and Carpenter's use of Hitchcock.
Right. Yeah, right.
To deceive the viewer, and I love that. Everything you were saying in the ranking episode about the questions of voyeurism that are raised by the camera techniques in this cold open. Immediately we're bringing something new to the table. So we go for, like, there's basically, as I see it, and there might be more distinctions to make here, but broadly there are kind of three alternating points of view. There's the director's point of view, there's an in-world voyeur point of view, and then there's the assailant, Jason.
Right.
And the camera is continually moving between those perspectives without letting you know.
So fluidly, though.
So fluidly, yeah.
It reminds me of when we were talking about Psycho, and Marion was putting her clothes away, that scene where the camera's kind of moving like water. And so early on in this movie, I'm keyed into, one, I feel like I'm watching great directing, but I'm watching it from a first-time director, which, I don't know, it just kind of blows me away.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we start with this kind of Halloween-style Steadicam shot, which turns into what we think is the assailant's point of view, and still, I guess, could be. And then it goes back to the director.
Yeah.
that's really tricksy stuff to pull off.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And again, it's like it's Hitchcocky, and this is not easy. This is not easy to certainly not for your first film. This is not something you would expect a rookie to pull off.
Right.
But they do. And then, this amazing kind of amazing horror film technique of successive fake outs.
Right.
That because of the patterning of them become shocks.
Mm-hmm.
So we get like a series of jump scares,
but they don't feel cheap.
Well, that's it. But they're building to
right.
What we don't. They're providing a moment of respite that lures us into a false sense of security.
Mm-hmm.
That leads into two successive shocks: the head in the fridge and the screwdriver in the brain.
I think it's a nice pick.
That's a really clever. Oh, sorry. Yes, it's a really, that would make more sense, and it's a really just a really clever patterning of of that effect.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And as you say, like if you do it wrong, it'll feel redundant, and it never does.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we have this Hitchcock-like dispensing of the legacy heroine in the first scene, and it's using the idea of character continuity that that there's potential for in sequels as a smokescreen.
Right.
As a red herring. And another touch in this scene that I absolutely love, and I think if you're coming out with 29%,
it's crazy.
I don't get it. Jason turning off the kettle.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the way that plays into the domesticity of the mother-son dynamic, and this is all we know about Jason at this point. He's a mommy's boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for one of the first acts we see, Jason is to turn off the kettle. He's still a good boy. He's not going to leave a kettle.
I took it in another direction too, because I kind of like the idea of him also not wanting to be found. Don't let anybody into the apartment too soon. To hey, you okay in there?
Yeah. It's a little bit sneaky Michael Myers.
Yeah. Right. In real time.
Not unintentionally.
Yeah.
In real time. But I think, again, having the confidence to, rather than ending your scene with the money shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
of
right,
the ice pick in the head, but ending it with this character touch. However you read it.
Just that little extra.
Remarkable confidence. Again, that you don't see from experienced directors, never mind first-time directors.
Mm-hmm.
And you're dealing with a horror audience here who you assume are all about instant gratification, and you're challenging them to not necessarily crave and desire that instant gratification.
Yeah, exactly.
All the time.
And you're also taking the time to build character for a person who is only going to be in your film for 2 minutes. I was going to say 20 seconds.
I gotta say, she I can't believe she improvised.
I was going to say the phone call with mom. That's what a great little bit to add for a character.
She was just making it up.
Just making it up on the spot.
With no direction, with no parameters. They just said, just have a conversation with on the phone with your mom on the phone, and then she does sort of, she gets at a bunch of psychological aspects of the character that we wouldn't have done
otherwise. And so
Steve
Miner's able to build on that through walking around with her in the apartment. He's able to build tension. Then a jump scare, then the extra flare at the end. There's a lot going on in just the first couple minutes of this movie to show you you're in safe hands, you're on solid ground.
Yep, and you're going to be your expectations are going to be challenged.
Yeah, right.
Narratively, stylistically, nothing can be taken for granted, which is exactly how you want your sequel to be.
I agree. Well, should we take a break? We got through the cold open.
One scene. Yeah, let's rest on our laurels. We got through one scene.
Then we'll come back. All right.
Well, these are short movies.
We're not going to be here Star Wars length of time, so.
You say that now.
Yeah, you're right. Could be wrong. All right, we're going to take a break, right or wrong, and we'll be back in a minute, right after this quality message. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, starting to gush about Steve Miner and the work he's doing in Friday the 13th Part 2. And now I guess it's time to start meeting our kids.
Well, we got to talk about the exploding titles.
Oh, you're right. I
mean that's literal, right? It's the sequels blowing away the original. That's the idea.
Yeah. I love everything going on about all titles in all of these sequels.
Yes. They tell their own story, don't they?
They really do.
And it's also the story of the movie in microcosm, yeah.
And I love that, they came up with this idea for just Friday the 13th. Something to happen on Friday the 13th with the original film. Yeah. And they came up with like an ad for the movie before they'd even written a script saying this is what's going to happen.
Old school.
With that old school kind of block letters.
Yeah.
And they stick with that for the first one, and then here they stick with it and then blow it up.
Yeah.
It's fucking great.
I think it's excellent. And
and it's 14 minutes. It's like 14 minutes into the film when we're done with all the credits.
Yeah. It's a genuine cold open.
Yeah.
All we saw was a Steve Miner film before the action began. The title scoring sits somewhere between Bernard Herrmann's Psycho and David Shire's Taking of Pelham 123. Which, I mean, two better precedents you could not have.
Is there a better last look in a movie than Walter Matthau in The Taking of Pelham 123?
No. I remember once my DVR cut off that moment, and I was
so pissed.
I'm grieved to this day about that. Yeah, because that is the music comes right, go da da da, just as he comes through the door. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of something else I noticed. This is really more of a credit check, but lots of Cunningham family members.
Yeah.
in the title.
Absolutely.
Plus many names that, if you've seen Crystal Lake Memories, you'll be like, he takes over the franchise, and then he takes over the franchise.
And then he takes over.
So yes, I love the titles as well.
Good.
My first note is that so many directorial notes here. It's almost like I was just watching that aspect of the movie. I was so taken by it. The tow truck taking the car away in the background of the shot.
Yeah.
I mean, great use of cinematic depth of field. Probably my favorite technique in all of film is when foreground and background are used simultaneously.
Yeah, right.
And this is a great example of that because they're in the phone booth and their car's been taken away, which is another fake out.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Plus, it's another fake out.
And then the return of Crazy Ralph.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I didn't even remember that.
No. Well, he's not around for long, but
No.
enough to make an impact. I also love, and again, I think this is really good sequel filmmaking, how the events of the first film are now just the ramblings of a madman.
Right, exactly.
But you also do what sequels...
That's smart, though, isn't it?
Very smart. And
Because-
you also get the return of a legacy character that everyone can... You can trade off the original movie, but you could also put the original movie in a different context.
Right.
Which is that and it's telling the audience that no one believes this is true. This has become folklore.
Mm-hmm.
Which is going to be very important for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
The idea that
Well, that leans to why I thought they went for the 5 years.
yeah, that makes sense. They 5 years for it to become legend. You know, that 5-year legend mark.
Everyone knows that. That's the 5 years is where you gotta get to before it becomes folklore.
And the tow truck prank kind of establishes this atmosphere of jokiness. Within the characters, not in the movie, just in the characters. And what's great about that is we know that's going to play into the horror at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whenever I see that in a horror movie, and maybe this is one of the first times it's happened, I'm like, there's going to be a boy who cried wolf aspect to this at some point. Someone's not going to know that someone else is joking when something bad happens.
I mean, I feel like we get that more concretely in part 3, obviously, but
Well, you get everything more concretely in part 3. That's part one of the drawbacks of that movie. Whereas here it's more subtly layered throughout the film.
yeah. But you also, I spoke to one of these movies cosmically feeling very much like the movie that preceded it, and that's this movie, because you have the jokester character, and that the first movie had that as well. And so you feel like you're trading, you're substituting archetype for archetype, surrogates, yeah.
Well, again, you've got that Beneath the Planet of the Apes situation where you've got the surrogate and the legacy character on screen
right together. Yeah.
And it's I would say that because essentially Jason is at this point a surrogate Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That's hard to it's hard to quantify because of what happens in the next few movies, but we do have to remember at this point. He is a replacement. He is a replacement for Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah.
Just as there's a replacement Final Girl, there's a replacement Jokester. Arguably, there's a replacement Crazy Ralph later in this movie, and certainly in the next movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Crazy Ralph for the 3D era. And of course...
What is that he's got in his hand? Never mind. We'll get there.
We'll talk about it. I certainly saw it close enough. I don't know why there should be any ambiguity. And again, like... I don't think this screenplay was assembled with any great care, but it's again, retrospectively, it looks more organized than most screenplays that people work on for years at a time now.
I agree, and then
because
go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say that we're already establishing runners. This is the guy who tells jokes.
Yeah, right.
And that kind of permeates the movie, and this movie the script feels thought through at the very least.
Mm-hmm. But I also feel there are nods. There's a moment where they're all driving in the car, and one of the guys is saying, well, we just have to go past the cemetery, and then we have to get onto the old dirt road. And it just felt very House on Haunted Hill to me. Yeah. You know what I mean?
You feel like they should turn around and go, listen to what you just said.
Listen to what you said. What's the matter with you? Turn around. Exactly.
Then we get another great point, again, another ambiguous point of view shot where we get the view from the shack, what later turns out to be Jason's crumbling shack.
Mm-hmm.
And given the cold open, because of what we saw in the cold open, we're like, this could be something or nothing.
Yeah, right.
It just got the director has set up this film so well, you never know where you are.
Right.
In the rest of the movie because of how he did the cold open, how he handled the camera in the cold open, and then we see a hand. So that's okay, so that's a person, not the director.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, but then later in the movie we're told that this can still be people's point of view, but not necessarily Jason's.
Yeah, right.
And that's what makes this movie brilliant.
Sure.
Because very soon we'll be introduced to a character who I feel is every bit as capable of becoming a serial killer as Jason Voorhees.
That's great.
whose point of view we see as if it is Jason's.
As if it was Jason, right?
Actually, we're right there.
Yeah.
My next note is disability and butt cheeks.
Yeah.
That was a great. So, like, in turn, we see this kind of very well-meaning attempt to put a disabled character into a slasher, which somehow is more offensive than the most offensive version of this I've ever seen, which is in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, the guy in a wheelchair who's just the worst fucking guy in the world in that movie.
Yeah.
And this is the opposite of that, but it's somehow more offensive because they go to such lengths to make him the perfect
he's so great
model.
And at one point, I wrote down, I think I'm more invested with his relationship with, I forget her name right now, but
yeah.
I'm sure I'll find it in my notes later. I was so invested in their relationship at one point in this movie. I thought, this is what makes this movie great. I care about more than just killing, and you know, Steve Miner has made me able to care about this one little side story, not the B story, not the C story, maybe the D story.
Yeah,
it's great,
and it's like representational give and take. Because we've introduced a disabled character, it means we can have the jean shorts with the butt hanging out, and then just like sexual, catapult sexual harassment.
Yeah, right.
Unchallenged, unquestioned.
Yeah. Just part of doing business.
And I think it's like you have to have one to get for the other to be okay.
Do you think that was what they were thinking while they were making it? It's got to be by accident.
I don't know. I think most of the juxtapositions are intentional in the movie. There's no reason to think that this one isn't. I mean, and again, this is 1981. The flinging the catapult at the girl's butt is no greater sign that they think that this is harmless fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So, for all that we're gushing about this movie, the representational problems kind of...
There are some.
Yeah. It shouldn't get a pass, but nonetheless, it's still interesting and compelling and shouldn't be dismissed because it has these elements.
Mm-hmm. Now, because one of my next notes, because what do you think of the idea? Because I think the scene is effective in itself, certainly narratively for the characters, but as an audience, we get a second recap of what happened in the first movie around the campfire.
This is apparently where I stopped watching what was going on and started listening to the screenplay, following the screenplay, because the counselor training scene, where he addresses where the camp.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, because Ginny shows up late, and we do have that bit first.
Like all the dynamics between all the characters are established efficiently and effectively in one.
You're right.
Scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, certain nuggets are dropped that will come into play later in the movie, but we don't know are important yet.
Like, I'd like to go check out Crystal Lake.
Well, that's a little more on the nose, but I'm thinking of, this is pretty on the nose. Why don't you use a little of that child psychology you're majoring in?
Right, yeah.
And at the time, I'm sort of
And it's not the only thing. We're gonna watch Ginny play chess. We're gonna see that she can think.
She's gonna put a chainsaw in storage.
Yeah, right.
We can see, she's got car problems.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So all of this is being set up, but it's sort of happening organically enough.
But it goes back to what you're saying about the script. There's a lot of efficient shit going on in this movie right now.
And of course, when they mention that she's majoring in child psychology, that obviously comes into play in the ending. But it could also just be a sort of nod to thematically the character is studying what the movie is about, which is child psychology. Right. So it could be that innocuous. It is. Once you get to the end of the movie, you realize that it's just it's setting up what's going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, the telling the Jason story as a campfire tale once again, just as it's the crazy ramblings of a madman, it also exists in world as a juvenile ghost story.
Yeah. Right.
Which is And as you said, it's an innovative way to do the catch-up exposition that you need to do to get the audience on the same page.
But I think it's interesting that because we already had the cold open, we've already actually seen what happened in the first movie.
That doesn't really tell us anything, though, does it? It's sort of like...
I guess not, but so maybe that's the reason for it then. If you haven't seen the first movie, you're okay because you get this scene and you get a real explanation.
I think it does a lot of things. That's one of them. It establishes the stakes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where we get the information that Jason is now the killer. He's moved up he's been promoted. It's true. That's what the movie says. And it tells us, and this is new as well. I don't think this is the original movie, that the camp is his territory that he's going to defend.
Yeah, right.
This is all new information.
Yeah.
Even the idea of Jason being in the wood rather than under the lake is new information.
Right.
So
and it's got a real get off my cloud kind of.
Well, I don't know. I might probably save this for later in the movie, but where I feel like this movie stands alone is that it's the only one of these sequels that we're watching that is genuine wilderness horror.
Yeah, right.
Like, it feels like a film that's closer to maybe Deliverance than Halloween.
Than all the
sometimes.
other ones, yeah.
Yeah. Because it is about man versus nature, the urban versus the rural.
Mm-hmm.
That's the, folk horror.
Yeah, right.
That is what reads to me in this movie. And that's why I think, he's in... what do you call them? In the overalls and the pillowcase, because it looks a bit more country.
Mm-hmm.
He looks more like a country bumpkin.
It lends to that for sure.
Yeah, and he's a trapper in a way that I don't think he is until maybe the reboot. This idea of him as like trapping people like wild animals. I think the next time we see that is in the reboot. And
kind of that, we talked about it just a little while ago. That idea of sneaky Michael Myers.
Sure, yeah, no, definitely.
That quality.
Yeah. But anyway, and also, so the scene is there to also establish a timeline in which this and the original movie takes place. Because we don't know that either until this point.
That's true, yeah.
This is where we find out we're in the
5 years.
Yeah, this is where we find out we're in the future.
Right.
So, yeah, this is pretty essential information. And then, of course, it ends with
Ted the Joker.
Ted the Joker, self-parodying the mythology that they have established minutes before. And it also shows that the iconography is a work in progress, because he appears in this kind of like cannibal kind of a getup. It's like, well, we don't know what Jason looks like yet, so why couldn't it be this?
Right.
This could be his mask.
I was just gonna say,
let's road test it here.
Forever?
Yeah.
Plus, in the next movie, Shelley, he brings more than one mask. He's got a kind of a similar, not a similar mask to this, but a kind of a clear face mask.
Absolutely. So the iconography is a work in progress because they don't have it. They don't know how to represent Jason when they're parodying Jason yet. So
right.
It's a very clear idea. There's also some good meta commentary in this scene. They talk about the second act needs work.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Like knowing you're a sequel and knowing that you're trying to you're writing a sequel to a successful original.
Sure.
In the movie. And again, just the choice of rather than having new staff at the camp, this idea of a training center located that's adjacent to the original site is a bit more.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more interesting.
I every time I watch this movie, I always think it's interesting that they're close in proximity to the other camp, but they're their own thing.
Yeah.
And it's like Jason's kind of widening his net of.
Yeah.
Well,
and again, it's sort of like, I guess we talked about how there weren't any ground rules, but they're sort of positing a ground rule here, which is that if you
get near his,
that's right. If you stray into if you cross his borders, he's
fucked.
within his rights to attack you.
Yeah,
But then I
right.
guess he will go outside his borders to kill anyone who ever attempted that. So I get maybe that's why they didn't stick with that, because it doesn't really work. Because
Right.
then it's just like if one person goes in there, then he kills everybody, no matter where they are.
I'll follow you all the way to Texas.
And Scott is the guy, the catapultist,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, you know, if the whodunit element wasn't removed from this sequel, my money would be on Scott as the serial killer. He's got all the characteristics.
He's. Do you think he has the dead eyes?
Yeah, absolutely. I love how
That's
they're playing.
great.
You mentioned the chess. They're also playing. Is it electronic football that they're playing?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's like classic and contemporary pastimes, which is nice. It's like, you know, it gives an old fashioned style of horror movie a contemporary feel. Crazy Ralph is again another fake out. Here's another fake out where, you know, we assume it's Jason, and then it's revealed to be Crazy Ralph, and then Crazy Ralph is killed by Jason. So
Yeah, we get a little reversal.
if you well, yeah, you get but if you think about it, their POVs would be exactly the same because he's standing right behind it. So it's like in what is it? Escape from the Planet of the Apes with the man looking at a mirror who's looking at a mirror. You know, it's that kind of recursion theory. Because if you were to actually like map out what that looks like in reality, it would just be Jason stood directly behind Crazy Ralph as he looks into the house. But it's like doing all that great work of playing with the viewer in terms of switching the camera perspective.
Well, yeah, there's that,
It's
and
beautiful stuff.
It's beautiful stuff, and then on top of that, you know, you take this character from the first movie. I you know, I won't say he survived the first movie, although technically he does.
He
But
just
he's not,
rode off on his bicycle.
Yeah, he just left, you know, but he's not a main part of the story. But to take someone we know
I'd
from
forgotten
the
that
first
detail.
movie and then immediately kill him, you know, it
Yeah.
gives you that sense that nobody's safe.
Nobody's
You know,
safe.
even if it's not a conscious thought, that's what that's what's boiling underneath your skin a little bit as an audience member, I think.
And just in terms of the storytelling, you're not expecting it because you wouldn't expect them to do it twice, and they do it twice.
Yeah, right.
It reminds you that you can never trust the perspective you're watching the characters from.
Yeah.
So
We do have a few moments, especially around this area. They're walking in the forest, in the trees. He's, you know, she's looking for her dog, kind of by the barracks.
Muffin
There are
Cup, yeah.
Muffin, looking for Muffin. There are a few moments in this movie where the actors are kind of looking right down the barrel of the camera, and we have just recently seen Jason kind of standing. You know, it looks like he should be easily seen from where he is.
Right.
But you know, I give the movie a pass on that.
You can suspend disbelief on that. We get this. I don't know if they do this.
I do
again.
like it when Muffin walks right up to Jason's feet, and we hard cut to hot dogs grilling on the grill.
Yeah, I mean that shows an ability to do editing with wit and irony, right?
Yeah, right.
It's not, as you might imagine in a film on this budget, it's not simply clumping together the images in order.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Some thought and intelligence.
Some thought has been put into it. Right, exactly.
And it's very funny. There's a weird transition before that, which reminds me of the opening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you get the kind of exposure transition. It's actually an effect you can do on iMovie now, but I think they only do it once, maybe twice in the whole movie. So I don't know if it was like they wanted to have every scene do that, or whether they just thought it was appropriate for the shot. But it's a nice touch, and it calls back, I think, to the the first ever slasher film.
Yeah, right.
And the way that opens with the camera
so good,
flashing on the skull. As if the exposure transition wasn't Texas Chainsaw Massacre enough, we'll see Ginny putting away a chainsaw.
Yeah.
She might as well just say, "I'll be seeing you later," while she's doing it. Yeah, and all the thematically we're establishing these oppositions of the city and the country, you know, that when they're walking around, they're saying, "Oh, we can tell everyone back in the city about that." So it's made very clear that they're like urban fish out of water, and that's part of the horror here. And that doesn't really come back. It also explains why there's so much talk about bears and safety in this movie. That really feels like it's addressed to an urban audience, right? It's like people who actually live out here don't give a shit about this kind of thing. It's like they'll just happily welcome bears into their yard. But like the idea of, oh, you could be eaten by a bear, or you know, get lost in the woods. It's such a kind of urban idea of horror. Based on this idea of the wilderness.
We have a different wild animal already stalking you.
Right, but it just struck me at that point. It's like, there was a lot of talk about bears. and this really doesn't, and this isn't going to come back. Like, I remember the movie well enough to know that it's not going to...
Yeah, right. We don't see a bear.
If they got saved by a bear. That was the last... Maybe that was the original ending.
I don't think they could ever afford a bear.
There is an alternate ending for this movie, which we'll talk about later, but it's not that Jason is killed by a bear. Yeah, my next note is Muffin Top. Because you see the dog, you see the sort of dog has been kind of skinned and eaten by Jason, which is a specific callback to Halloween, right?
Halloween, right, yeah.
Because Michael Myers eats the dog, but I guess...
They both like dog.
We don't... Right. But the significance of this... It's at the time it just seems like a Halloween reference, but this is gonna come back later.
But exactly.
It's gonna challenge our conception of what we're watching.
That's the thing, is that, you know, what I like about this movie is within the script, nothing's forgotten.
Nothing's forgotten, and it's used so cleverly.
Yeah.
Because when Muffin comes back into the movie, you have to reappraise what you're watching. It's like someone giving you a quiz at the end of the movie.
Absolutely. Now, are we at the point? In my notes, Jeff and Sandra are gonna go try to find Crystal Lake, and they get caught by the cop.
Yeah, that's what I have here. He's like a surrogate Crazy Ralph, right? He's sort of like He's now the guy who's. I mean, I remember with Friday the 13th, and maybe this is in the Crystal Lake Memories documentary, but they have a specific moment where the cop leaves the camp, and this was to tell the audience that, you know, that's not how they were going to be. That's not how they were going to be saved. They're fending for themselves.
Yeah. I think that's in the next movie.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think so.
All right. Well, no surprises. This is the more interesting version, because the cop puts, when he has his exchange with the head counselor, he puts the blame squarely at the feet of the permissive nature of young people.
Yeah.
That is what is wrong. That is why Jason kills. Because you're all a bunch of hippies.
Damn kids.
He says, you know, like, he checks the counselor's punishment for these two kids.
Yeah,
He's like, that's all you're going to do?
That's all you're going to do? Right.
And so it's very clear at that point. It's like, you know, there's the cliche that that slashers are inherently conservative because as soon as two unmarried people start to have sex,
right,
that's when the kill launches. That is true, but it's broader than that. It's about permissiveness.
It's not just that.
It's permissiveness. It's hedonism, right? It's sex and drugs, and a generation challenging their forefathers. Anything that involves that's what brings the murderer to the cat. That's what brings the milk. It's the milkshake that brings everyone to the yard.
The yard, yeah, exactly.
And sometimes it's literally a milkshake.
But what I also like is the guy who complained about it, he also gets it.
Yeah. I think
and that's a pretty. I mean, I really dig that scene too. I love the running across the road, chasing him through the forest.
Yeah.
I love that there's sort of an arrogance about this cop, because for so long he never even pulls his gun. I mean, that's probably a good thing for police officers, but in this moment I think, man, he's really relying on his authority, isn't he?
And as well, as if we haven't said enough nice things about the camera work, some pretty pacey camera work going on with that forest pursuit.
Absolutely.
Like, whoever is operating the camera, very nimble, keeping pace with the movement of the scene.
Absolutely.
And I love it when when the cop arrives at his shack and it's crumbling.
Yeah.
And again, at the time, I'm just thinking, what a great way to, we're not going to see Jason, but let's see how he lives, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's great because, especially when you're unsure of what Jason's going to be, this is a great way to prevaricate. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, look, what kind of person lives here? I don't know what kind of person. Well, we don't know, but
The
look
kind
at
of
where he
person who
lives.
wears a sack on his head is the kind of person, I'll tell you who.
But of course, again, like nothing's wasted, nothing's forgotten. Later in the movie, the idea that the Shrek is falling apart plays into the finale,
Right.
and that's established here too.
Yeah, right.
Do you think it was a kind of continuity error, or like a film just because things were filmed out of order that they haven't put it together that the dog they saw was Muffin?
I don't know.
Because Terry, like, they don't mention to Terry, by the way, I think I saw your dog. I think I
Yeah.
saw your dog's skin out there. I think Muffin's dead. Because she is going, where's Muffin? I can't find Muffin.
Yeah.
These two kids saying nothing. Like, they're just stum the whole time.
Maybe they were just being nice.
And then I was sort of
Let's
like,
not upset her.
is this secretly like a special needs camp? Is that going to be the story twist? It's a camp for special children.
Oh, man.
An image that I absolutely love here, and it's just redolent with meaning, but yet has no specific meaning, which is the best kind of image.
Mm-hmm.
When they roll up the flag,
Oh, yeah.
it's like this army of sitting ducks doesn't even have Uncle Sam to protect them anymore. I just love, like, what a great touch. What a great way to end that scene.
The army is not on the way.
And it comes out of left field. It's sort of like, and again, it's just like routine, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
we'll take
right.
the flag down, we'll put because it's night, we'll put the flag down.
At the end of the day, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But like the turning off the kettle, you can read so much into that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the roadhouse.
I was just gonna say, so we separate the counselors, right? I like that moment too. Like, in the end, what's the blonde guy's name? Ted.
Yes, Ted. I think. Yeah, I have the character's name.
I like that he gives them the punishment they deserve, which is they can't go out to the roadhouse,
Yeah, well,
which
when
is
you
their
actually-
worst punishment. You know.
Yeah, again,
In the end, it ends up costing them their lives.
that's true.
You know what I mean? Oh no, wait. Ted is the jokester, right? So who is Jeff?
Let me see.
God damn it, Paul.
Paul, yes, played by John Fury. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ted is the
Ted
jokester.
Ted is gonna survive this because he goes to the roadhouse.
Well, we don't know. Actually, we don't know, and we don't know what happened to Paul.
Right.
But
Exactly.
we'll get there.
Yeah.
there's-
We're not
there's-
there yet.
There's two mysteries at the end of this movie.
Well, I think I have the one for Ted solved. He just never went back. He's safe.
That would be amazing. Whoever does like Friday the 13th Part 13 just
13.
just has like a post-credit sequence where Ted is still at that roadhouse in 2023.
Or you could start your cold open with it. Like he's been going to that roadhouse for the last 30 years.
Yeah, you just see him in the background, and
And then he gets
the
it.
whole bar is bottles. No, it's like
Yeah.
someone opens the door of the bar and then bottles just kind
Right.
of fire out. But again, like it does, and I guess Halloween 2 is coming out at the same time, and they're both doing the same things with the franchise, expanding the terrain.
Yeah, right.
So Halloween's set in this one street, essentially. Friday the
Right.
13th set bound to the camp. And both Halloween 2 and Friday the 13th Part 2 are showing you more of the town.
We brought in the town
Expanding
and
the
or
terrain.
forest.
Yeah. And apparently that roadhouse contains a casino.
Yeah.
But you never see the casino on screen.
You don't see
a
that portion of
lot
it.
of pinball machines and video and
Mhm.
arcade games, but yeah, it's so there's definitely I can see them both doing the same thing.
you also get, I think it's really smart because you get Ginny's speech about Michael
Yeah.
Myers, or not Michael Myers, about Jason. And
Might as
but
well
what you,
be.
Yeah, that's true.
We're Michael Myersing Jason.
Right.
Yeah.
But what you get is this overwhelming sense that she takes him seriously, and that might be the key to her not dying.
But if you think about it, that makes her Loomis.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, then yeah, absolutely. It does a really good scene to sort of build character and foreshadow what's coming. And then we cut away to the skinny dipping scene where we watch Terry undress for an awfully long time before we get to the killer's point of view.
Right. It's we're implicated at
Yeah.
first.
Exactly. Which is then revealed to be not Jason but Scott.
But Scott.
Right, which makes them kind of basically interchangeable.
By the way, in the Crystal Lake, in the Camp Crystal Lake, what is it? The memories. What's the
Crystal Lake Memories? Yeah,
memories? Yeah.
it's not an official Camp Crystal Lake memorabilia.
Right. But how great was it to listen to the guy Scott, and he just seemed like the most charming,
Yeah,
genuinely nice man.
they cast
Ever.
these really well. They don't
They really do a good job,
they don't,
don't they?
at least in this movie, they don't go, and I think in all the movies that we put in our top 3, they don't go for the low-hanging fruit casting wise, and maybe to the detriment of the movies that we like less, they do.
Yeah, right.
They get it's like, well, of course that guy is playing that role, but here you're sort of like, oh, that's an unusual choice. That's more of an unusual choice for this type.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into this is where the 3D part of Steve Miner's repertoire starts before he's even got a 3D camera, because
Totally.
Terry throws the towel into the camera and it hits the camera. So he's clearly already, even without 3D, he's thinking about Hitchcock and how he worked with 3D in the 50s and with Dial M for Murder, and he spoke. He's a fan of that movie. So it doesn't. That's exactly the kind of effect that Hitchcock used,
Totally.
and why Dial M for Murder is still watchable, even though you can't see it in 3D. It's because it works on 2 levels,
Yeah.
as it does here.
Well, we're about to get to some killing, I think.
Yeah,
Why
this
don't we
is
take
where
a break.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
All right.
I mean, let's take a break, not let's go and kill.
Good. I'm glad we got that straight. We'll be right back, and we'll start talking killing right after this.
Not killing, talking.
Right.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had 1, maybe 2 craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
We're back. Finishing up with Friday the 13th, Part 2. The Steve Miner first directorial effort.
Steve Miner major classic.
What a big batch of doesn't suck.
Yes, absolutely. I wish you were a film critic in 1981.
right?
Put that on the poster.
Well, as we said, we're going to start getting to some chopping.
Yeah, absolutely. They got the animal trap kill, followed by a hard cut to a electric bass country rock.
Yeah.
It's again that vision of traditional America with some modern touches. And this is where I have we talked about this a little bit, but this is specifically about Ginny's monologue where she describes him as some kind of boy beast.
Mm-hmm.
Which is sort of like the writer's idea session as to what to do with Jason somehow made it into the dialogue.
Yeah, right.
Because it's very non-committal. And this is where Ginny, in fact, she sort of opens the floodgates for. She specifically mentions resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Because I guess we have to, because Jason was dead.
Well,
far as
it's
we
supposed
knew.
to be.
Yeah, it gives them license to keep the franchise going with dialogue like this, I suppose.
Absolutely.
What
Credit
building,
where credit is due.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the monologue also suggests that Jason only turned evil 5 years ago. So what was he doing the rest of the time?
Doesn't matter, Tom.
It does. No, it
He
doesn't.
was eating
Yeah.
squirrel.
But I
Finally,
guess
he got hold of a bad squirrel, made him crazy.
Yeah. No, well, it's his mother's death that apparently.
Yeah, that's
not apparently drowning in a lake. That's that didn't affect him at all.
That wasn't that didn't anger him very much. But watching his mom get beheaded,
Yeah,
he didn't care for that.
I guess if he'd been if he'd been planning his return, and it just happened to fall at the exact moment that his mother was being headed, I guess it's understandable. And we also get the what I call a great study in ableism.
Oh yeah.
Back when you had to explain why someone was disabled and
Mm-hmm.
why they couldn't just be disabled.
Yeah.
And again, that assumption that every disabled person is just their whole life is around recovering from their disability.
I am going to someday not be using this chair. I tell you.
It's like it's like not about living with it.
Right.
And when you have to, and this happens a lot with disabled representation in this period, and probably for decades to come, where it's like
Probably even still now.
probably even still now in certain, even though we're a bit more savvy about these things.
Yeah.
Apparently the audience needs to know whether they can have sex or not.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't seem like it's any of my business. But nonetheless,
I think at
the
this
film's
time
gonna
they're
tell us.
assuming that the audience will be asking, "Hey, the important
Can he
question
fuck?
is, can he fuck her?"
Yeah, but you watch representation. It always comes up.
Oh yeah.
It's like, but can you like? It's like none of your fucking business. Stay in your lane.
Well, at least the character's asking because she wants to fuck him.
Yeah, and he's so idealized. It's kind of insane.
I also liked that
he's impossibly disabled.
I also liked that the actress Mark and Vicky, I think, are the character names.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
That's right. Tom
And-
McBride and
yeah.
Vicky.
Lauren Marie
Don't have
Taylor.
There we go.
As I understand it, she had quite a crush on him, but in real life, he is a gay man, and so she kept kind of after him, and he just said, "No, you're barking up the wrong tree."
And they clearly cast him as disabled because he was gay.
Probably.
Right? I mean, back in '81, they were like, "Well, this is...
But in terms of in terms of representation,
we see it as an affliction."
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what does work is his death scene.
yeah, and an unintentional homage to Laurel and Hardy's The Music Box. I don't know if you've seen that movie where Ollie keeps falling
Down this.
And Ollie Dummy keeps falling down sets of stairs with a music box. And that's what it reminds me of most of all.
I love that
they throw that dummy.
What I like about that scene, one, I love how much tension Miner can build up.
Yeah.
I also love, like, we're playing around with point of view because it seems like Jason's behind him, but then we find out it's just Miner as the director.
Yeah. It's gonna be one of the three. Again, it's just in this. If you map this out in the real world, it's Crazy Ralph, Jason's behind him, Steve Miner's behind him, Scott's lurking in the bushes,
We're doing something skeevy. But when he finally gets, also, I think it's just this movie in which Jason seems to not ever know what side of a machete to use.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's a great.
He's had no formal education.
That's true. It's his first try at killing.
You remember that Sam Cooke song? Don't know much about machetes.
Don't know much about hacking heads. But he's gonna get it right in the face, and it's such a great piece of body horror. Then down one set of stairs and down the second set of stairs. What I really like is there's a hard cut right when it seems like that wheelchair was really, I don't know if it's a real person in the wheelchair at this point, but I
hope not.
I suspect it was, because they hard cut right at the moment he was really going to get hurt. Or
if
actually
it was
did
person,
really
that
get hurt.
That person is now dead.
Yeah.
Whether it happened at the time or whether they were unable to recover from it, that person's dead now.
But what's fantastic is you're talking about a person with a machete in the face, and you up how worried you are about them with the fall down the stairs. Fucking fantastic.
I love the idea that there's still hope for them.
Yeah, exactly.
They've got a machete through their face.
I'm telling you, it's the good work of Steve Miner.
It is the good work of Steve Miner, and what I kind of noticed here is that, you know, obviously this is tasteless and on the nose.
Yeah, sure.
But the editing is intelligent, because you go into that orgasm cut, you intercut sex and violence, which is, you know, how editing kind of should work in a slasher, you know, that converge sex and violence until they're synonymous.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's interesting, again, like broadening the church of what Jason is in opposition to.
Yeah, right.
So sex, drugs, harmonica playing, hipster hats. Makes him seem more and more like a reasonable human being.
Doomsayers.
The more they kind of widen the canvas.
Don't you warn anybody that I'm bringing doom. You piece of shit.
And and again, the movie's sort of playing with voyeurism, but also just full on obscenity, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get a bush shot.
Yeah, right.
In this scene, and then we kind of, the point of view goes behind a post after we've seen the bush, as if that matters now. That you know, it's kind of like Austin Powers, but you know, you saw his knob, and then you put the teacup
right.
You know, it only works one way. Again, double entendre accompanied by obscenity. What do you think of the perfuming the bush moment?
I didn't care for it.
At that point, I was like, these is two male screenwriters struggling to figure out what women do behind closed doors and really fumbling the pass. You think they?
It only takes a second to think about what it is they're making the woman do.
Yeah.
And there's a real good one later on in a further sequel.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
And I'm also surprised to learn it was not the director's idea.
Oh, okay. I haven't got that far in the documentary yet.
No, we'll talk about that when we get there. But I was very surprised, as indeed you will be, to learn that was not the director's idea, that was the actor's idea.
Oh, wow.
Certainly they signed off on it, but...
All right, fine then. But I just don't imagine. One, it's just not that smart. You know? If you're gonna have foreplay, if at some point these two are going to go, let's just, for example, say down on each other,
Yeah.
that's not what I want to lick. Perfume.
Yeah, yeah, well, you're not supposed to...
You're gonna poison the man.
Yeah, that's very true. That's yet another reason why it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's dumb.
Jason having just... Because also the other thing about this, everyone calls it the bag, right? The bag on his head.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bag, it's a pillowcase.
It's not a
And
pillowcase.
he gets it. It is a pillowcase, and he gets it from the bed when he kills the couple in the bed. It's a pillowcase.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we've all Mandela affected that he's got like a fucking straw bag on his head, like a scarecrow. No, it's a pillowcase. He's cut an eye out of it,
All right.
and he doesn't have anything on his head. We just don't see his face until he goes
that
there.
moment. Really?
Yeah.
Then you're right. I did Mandela effect.
And then about 5 minutes later, he takes it off. Even Jason doesn't think it works. It just feels it's got the feeling of, and by feeling I mean certainty.
My head is too mongoloid for this bag, sir. I broke you.
Yeah. Cut that out of the recording and loop it. But it's the producers are clearly trying to decide what Jason should look like as the film goes along, scene to scene.
Yeah, right.
They're like, oh no, the pillowcase doesn't work. Have him take it off. At this point, and then we get a literal inversion of the Kevin Bacon death in the original movie, because it's spear through the bed from top to bottom,
from top
instead
to
of
bottom,
spear bottom to top.
Yeah,
it's a reverse Savini.
Yeah, right.
Which will be re-reversed in later movies.
Well, and I was surprised to learn that they were catching some shit that I guess this came in a previous horror film. But to hear them talk about it, they didn't know that.
Well, even if they did,
I know they're copying enough that.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a copy of a copy. You know,
yeah,
it's
of course.
They're also copying themselves.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, if it's good enough for them.
Yeah. You know, that's the other thing about Jason in particular. We think of him with the machete. Man, this guy uses a lot of tools.
Right, yes, it's absolutely.
He's picking up everything.
In this movie particularly, he's a full-on Wile E. Coyote, I think. With
yes. You expect him to have a box in that shack from Acme.
Exactly. This scene, you get some fantastic focus shifts.
Mm-hmm.
The night when you kind of what is it called, racking focus, when you go from background to foreground.
Right.
The knife, where you see the knife as a blur and then it becomes clear, and just using all the potential that the camera brings without having to cut everything you can do in camera.
Right.
Which is, we say this a lot, but a bit of a lost art, I think.
I agree.
You don't need to cut to have two different shots, if you know what I mean. Like,
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't sound like, you know what I mean. Like sometimes you can have two different shots going on simultaneously, and it just like where you move the camera in frame, or where you even just shifting the focus can change the shot. Absolutely. It struck me that Ginny's basically the dramatic version of the woman from Airplane, because she keeps saying things like, "Oh, he never does that. He never does that. Ted never does that at home. Ted never vomits a bag at home.
Uncontrollably at home." There's another thing I like about this movie, and we've talked about this plenty, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the other sequels. This movie does something that no horror sequels or horror movies seem to do. A murder happens, and somebody comes into the room where the murder happened, and it's clearly evident a murder has happened.
Yeah.
When Ginny and Paul walk into that room, that bed's covered in blood, as it should be, because a murder happened there.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
Later on, we're going to get a guy walking on his hands, split in half,
Oh.
and somebody's going to walk out of the shower, and there's no evidence that a man was split in half in that hallway.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
I like that.
I like that too. I think it is. It cuts through some of the, the creakiness of these kinds of movies.
Yeah,
This is
right.
Sort of like, and some of that is these movies are being made very fast on a tight budget, so
Sure.
it saves them from having to redress the scene, that kind of thing. But I imagine it all plays into the dynamism of it, and the ability of the camera to move so swiftly
Right, yeah, absolutely.
is what really makes these scenes sing.
But when Ginny and Paul come back into that house, I'm trying to remember the order, because I remember, like Miner's doing a really good job at building and building and building tension.
Yeah.
And then I loved that moment where he's just got the camera on Ginny and she knows something's up. And she says out loud, "There's somebody in this room." Because that really plays on the sense of horror we have within ourselves when you walk into a room and you just know something's off.
Yeah. And
It's
it's so simple.
good. It's so simple, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can do that on any budget.
Mm-hmm.
If you've
Exactly
got the
right.
sense
Yeah.
to sort of put it in there. And I think this is where the Jason problems are kind of most evident, is he looks kind of comic in the pillowcase. The pillowcase, I guess because it's white, or I don't know if they're spotlighting him, but he looks kind of luminous. So his ridiculousness is sort of underlined. And then I'm a fan of the editing throughout this film, except in this one chase scene where they decide to kind of cut it up as a montage where he's chasing Ginny. And it really...
You mean the whole
undercuts the
thing, or
suspense.
like...
Well, they start chasing...
Because there's
he
portions
starts
I
chasing
love
her.
when she's in that room and there's not really a lock on the door. She's holding the door.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when she's sort of slowly moving her
They
hand
keep
towards the window
keep-
and then he comes through. I love that.
Oh yeah, it's specifically when he's chasing her. They keep cutting away to the moon and then fading in and out as if time has
gotcha.
passed.
Yeah.
And it just ruins the effect of it. And again, it stands out because everything else is done so
It's
perfectly.
done so
It's
well,
like,
yeah.
this seems like, I mean, maybe they just didn't have the footage, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when she's trapped under the bed and the rat comes out and she pisses herself,
Mm-hmm. Controversial.
Although-
Some people think it's the rat.
that's a lot of piss. for
Awful
a
lot
rat.
of urine for a rat.
Although again, that is like, it's interesting that there's no scene earlier on in the movie, unless I'm forgetting it, where it's like, oh, I hate rats. I have a phobia of rats. It's just assumed that she's a woman,
Yeah.
probably.
But
scared
I
of
also-
rodents.
I want to say, because I hear what you're saying about, the intersplicing of the moon and that shit. But one of the things I like about this chase between Jason and her, this is one of the moments where they toggle back and forth really well. At some point in the chase, you're with her. At some points in the chase, you're with him. I dig that.
Okay.
We're with her, she disappears, and then we're following him, and he goes past a car, and then we pull back, and there she is, and he moves on, and she, then we follow her running away. There's some, there's stuff I like in that.
Okay. No, I don't. It stood out to me as perhaps just a misstep in the editing to make it a montage rather than a. I guess they've already done a forest pursuit that is continuous, so maybe they're just trying to switch it up. I don't know.
Right.
But it didn't work for me. Just that sort of cutting away to the moon thing.
Yeah.
That just every time sort of undercut the suspense.
I really like that. There's a sly Jason trick, a tricky like a Michael Myers sneaky moment where when he's standing on the chair, he makes her think he's left the room.
Hmm.
And when she gets out from the bed,
Well, and that's all implied because visually he's stumbling around. Obviously, he can't see because they didn't think that through. He's falling off things.
Yeah.
Because he can't see, and it's
well, I would suggest that the chair couldn't bear his weight either.
he doesn't look that. He's not.
I'm just saying that's the way
the bodybuilder
that's the way
of
Steve
later
Miner
movies.
seemed to shoot it to me.
Yeah, it's just a little. It's klutzy,
All right.
and I don't think it was supposed to be. Then we get the return of Chekhov's chainsaw. Which is great because it's a callback to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we've seen it earlier in the movie, so we know it's going to be there. And this is where I like the kind of vulnerability because he's still got, and this disappears in later movies quite rightly, the boyishness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he's backing away.
Yeah, he's scared
Yeah,
off. Right?
absolutely.
Like he's out of his depth, so there's still a sense of Jason, the boy beast.
Yeah.
More boy than beast. And then the Mother Skull Shrine is going back to the well of both the original movie and prototypical slashers like Psycho as well.
Totally.
Like that's clearly the reference. Again, like trying to fill the vacuum of not knowing quite what you're doing yet with great stuff from other movies, which I'm totally in favor of.
Sure, right.
Even the sort of Ginny dressing up as his mother, of course, is a sort of inversion of Psycho.
I guess, yeah.
The transvestitism.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's clearly what they're thinking of.
Yeah, what I like is there's that extra added layer of survivorism. Like nobody wants to get sliced and diced, but I kind of like the idea of feeling like you have to put on that gross, terrible sweatshirt that a dead head's been on for months and years or whatever, how long it's been. And not wanting to do it, but you can even, there's that in the performance of it, of this is terrible, this is gross, but it's how I'm going to survive. I dig all of that.
I really thought she was gonna like put her head inside the collar, and then put
the head on top.
I'm really glad they resisted the low hanging fruit there of doing that, and a great excuse to bring Betsy Palmer back without retconning the last film. I mean. Or at least not retconning it as much as they already have.
But mommy's talking to you? It's fucking great.
Yeah, and again, the child psychology thing plays out. So it's a combination of what you're talking about. It's like being the smartest, but also the most resourceful.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, which is kind of how Deliverance goes down, really, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It's sort of like they just keep weeding out the most urban until we get to the people who might be able to survive in the wilderness.
Right. Well, now let me ask you this, because the original movie and this movie rely on the same technique. Are you okay with that slow motion with the music?
Oh, you're asking me specifically because of my dislike of slow motion. Well, it's consistent.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's within the style of the last movie's ending, which we also saw at the beginning of this movie.
I think there's something that works about it and works well. I don't know.
Well, I love it in the original.
Uh-huh.
So
okay,
why shouldn't it work here? There's a few things that are really interesting. I love that when Jason's face is revealed, there's a look of non-specific disgust on Ginny and Paul's face, and it's clear. We don't know what he's gonna look like.
Yeah, right.
It's like show you're disgusted without showing what you're disgusted at.
They probably shot this on day 3.
But this is better. I think this. So the original. I think the original ending works brilliantly as a jump scare, but conceptually it's a bit muddy.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of keep going back and forth between, is it a dream? Did it really happen?
Yeah,
and
right.
they never successfully resolved that. When you see Muffin here, you as an audience member, you're like, oh, this can't be real. It's like an Inception moment. It's like, oh, this can't be real. There's Muffin. We know Muffin's dead. But then, and in the back of your mind, you start to second guess yourself and going, well, that could have been a different dog.
Yeah, maybe.
And then, and so the movie's ending is clearer in its delineation of dreams and reality, but it still has that room for ambiguity that makes it an interesting watch. And it adds to. I think the original ending is one of the best endings in horror, and that they're trying to match and top it. You know, we know sequels do this; they try to up the ante, and there's that slow look at Jason that adds more dread to the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It was much more the original is much more about shock value.
Sure.
This draws out the look at Jason.
This is going to
to
be
the-
just
to the
as
build-up.
frightening a moment for the character, but for the audience, we're trying to get that plus. What is it the characters have been looking at throughout this whole film?
Showing those looks of non-specific disgust too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting because it's. I guess it's the same as the original. We're building to a happy ending, but that's undercut. But it's undercut in a more interesting way. Well, I don't know if that's true. It's pretty amazing how they sustain it in the original movie with it goes on as long as it possibly can.
Yeah, right.
Until you think nothing's going to happen and then suddenly something happens. So that's remarkable. But here it's more about that lingering doubt when you see Muffin. that's when your brain starts to sort of
plus,
add everything up.
I think in this one they, the lingering part, the special magic in the first movie too is the music. The music cues the audience that the movie is over, right?
Right.
And that's one
of the
things.
And it just goes on and on until you think it can't
And it has
possibly...
really smart stuff. The establishing shot of a cop car arriving, so you now feel extra safe, that kind of thing. I think the second movie obviously knows that they can't play on those tropes because the first movie exists, right? So we get to it sooner. In addition, I like what you're saying about Muffin because I think it's just enough time between Muffin and window break for you to go, wait a second, what's going on? Is Muffin safe? Was that a different dog? Was that, window? And
it's also, it's kind of like in a what's been a fairly realistic movie in terms of the way people are acting and the way it's filmed. You feel the fantasy of the opening the door and there's Muffin. It's basically a resurrect. It starts to feel dreamlike in a different way from the original, which is they put the soft focus.
It feels ethereal.
Yeah, exactly. This is more like sort of soap opera.
Yeah,
like heightening it, like everything's okay. We're gonna have a happy ending, after all. And then to cut through that with the Jason coming through the window, then followed by, being thrust back into reality in a harsh way by finding her on the stretcher, mumbling, "Where's Paul?
Where's Paul? Where is Paul?" I ask.
And I think it's great. I think it's sort of like clear to me that it was a dream, but the unresolved questions are not about the existence of Jason.
No, yeah, right.
In the first movie, they're about what happened to the other person who
was
the
last time we saw was safe.
Did they? Well, I don't know. It depends how far back you take it. Like, there's a point at which he disappears from the film. Did he die then? Did he survive but then died again? We don't know, and that's great. I think that works really well. And then, of course, the shot of the movie really ends with the shot,
Mrs. Voorhees.
Mrs. Voorhees' head, and this is great because they lean into the possibility of the supernatural and then pull back at the last minute. So that is an inversion of the last movie where you think nothing's going to happen and then something happens. Really, nothing happens. But of course, they filmed an ending where her fucking eyes open.
Where her eyes open. But how smart are they to not go down that road, right?
Yet.
Well, okay, yeah. Fine.
No, that's what's great about it. It's like we're going to do that in part 6, so let's not... let's not blow it now. I think that's part of it. I mean, they filmed it. They're obviously considering it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a... But again, the idea of leaning into the possibility of the supernatural. He's not a zombie, but he's also not just human.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I think that's where you
Yeah.
want it to end. That's where you want to leave it for the next movies. And then if someone wants to run with the supernatural, as Tom McLaughlin did,
Right.
it's not coming out of left field either.
Jason, Last Death Unknown. Voorhees.
Yes. Yeah. So great ending all round.
I love it. Yeah, I think it's great.
Different. I think different enough from the original, but enough of the same project.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, they feel like spiritual partners.
Yeah.
It feels like they're going for some of the same beats, but they're doing it in interesting and different ways, as we just talked
Yeah.
about with that window jump.
Mm-hmm.
And but clearly, to me, the ethos of this part 2 was to stay connected to that first film. They make deliberate choices. They're in the same area. We don't have the same killer, obviously, but we're trying to expand that so that the universe can go on.
Mm-hmm.
There are some stylistic choices that revert back to the first one, but again,
Yeah.
he's doing it in a different or interesting way, even if they're connected.
It's all you can ask from a sequel.
Yeah, really, it is. Yeah,
It's the one to beat.
I know. That's what I thought when I finished it. Fuck.
It's like at the beginning of a soccer tournament. It's like, oh, this is the team to beat.
Mm-hmm.
When do the team to beat ever win?
Yeah,
the actual
right.
Cup? Never.
I'll always take the field against one, like whatever it is, 64 teams in a basketball, tournament. Oh, it's got to be this team. No, I'll take the field, thanks.
Yep. Did I sound like I understood what the field was?
Different
like
field. Different
Is it
field.
like this? Is it like the spread in the movie Casino?
Oh, that's great. I got to start finding some sports sequels for you to watch.
Well, we tried with Bad News Bears.
That's true.
Unfortunately, they knew about as little about baseball as I did.
As you
So
did. You got a credit check?
sure do.
Go.
Extra counselors. I bet that made the supporting cast feel really special, being referred to as spare parts. More Cunninghams in the credits. Definitely
Oh,
feels like
yeah.
there's a lot of nepotism going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Location auditor, Pumpkin Payroll Service. Now, is this a company that deals exclusively with horror film locales?
I hope.
Yeah. They credit the part 1 footage separately, as if it was a movie within a movie and not just the end of the last movie again.
They do that for all of
finally,
these movies.
they do, and it sort of becomes quite an interesting catalog of it's like an archive of the movies. Hairstyles by 6 Feet Under.
Oh,
Why is there a hair studio named this?
I don't know.
Do they only do hairstyles for dead people? They don't do it for the living?
Yeah, it's attached to a funeral parlor.
Well, that would be great.
And that
but
it's the only place
Mrs.
they could
Voorhees
afford.
Pro- Sorry about this. I would normally do this on the dead.
Yeah. You burnt me. Oh, I don't have to usually worry about scalps.
Why are you draining my blood out of my body? Oh, I'm sorry. It's a package. Normally, it's a package deal.
Yeah. Was that it?
That's it.
Oh, well.
That's it. Yeah. Well, these are not.
These are
not
1980
expensive.
credits. We're not gonna.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be. Yeah.
That's one of the. If anything, that's one of the longer ones.
Okay, fine.
Oh, we didn't. I guess the Ted. The last time we see Ted, he's in the roadhouse.
I say he's alive.
Well, I mean, they have him ask an elderly couple if there's an after hours joint.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're asking those two. Those look like the least likely people who would know about an After Hours joint. Unless Ted saw that they've really lived, these two.
Yeah, right. They might have been telling stories in the bar.
It doesn't. There's nothing in the documentary. They do mention it, but they don't talk about like cut scenes where we find out what happens. I don't. But it really seems like it's going somewhere because
it would have been a good after credit scene
with the bartender, where it's like, it's like feels like it's going somewhere. It goes absolutely nowhere.
Would have been a good after credit scene.
Yeah, it would be. But I don't think they've got the time nor interest in that kind of thing.
True that.
I think getting the movie done is an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yeah, I have a feeling that all these movies, as they sometimes say, came to the theaters wet.
For many reasons. Certainly, Danny Steinman came to the set of New Beginning wet.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to tell us what you think of Friday the 13th, Part 2. We're fans.
Excellent. It's the one to beat, I tell you.
It's the one to beat, and it's third on my list.
It's only beaten by 2 other movies in this short run of sequels. That's the thing I need to keep reminding myself. We're not talking about all the Friday the 13th movies.
Yeah.
We're talking about just parts 2 to 6.
Just half of them.
And we're having trouble distinguishing one great movie from another.
Well, if you have thoughts, let us know. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and nothing else. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, I am Mike